My name is Mackenzie Thompson. I'm 28 years old, an architect on the verge of a professional breakthrough, and tonight I'll be standing on my Aunt Laura's doorstep, pie and gifts in hand, ready to face the family who, for years, has subtly, systematically cut me out of their lives. Tomorrow, my world will change, but they have no idea I'm about to unveil the hidden truths that poisoned our family, truths even my mother and siblings have been blind to. Before I tell you about that fateful Christmas night, that singular, brutal moment that served as a catalyst for a seismic shift in my family's fractured dynamics and, ultimately, in my own understanding of belonging and self-worth. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Your story might just be the beacon someone else needs. Hit that like button if you've ever felt betrayed by the very people who should love you most, those whose unconditional embrace you always assumed was your birthright, only to find it was a privilege conditional on their terms, subject to their whims. And subscribe to join our community of survivors who've learned that sometimes, often, in fact, leaving is not an act of surrender, but the first courageous step toward true healing. Growing up in the Thompson family always felt less like living and more like walking on eggshells. Every step was measured, every word weighed, every action scrutinized, particularly after my parents' divorce 5 years ago. It was an invisible minefield, and I, the perpetual optimist, often found myself detonating the unspoken tensions that permeated our lives. Dad, David Thompson, was always my anchor, my unyielding rock in a turbulent sea. He was a civil engineer by profession, but a gentle, steady force by nature. His hands, calloused from years of drafting and building, were always soft when he held mine. He was hardworking to a fault, patient with my youthful anxieties and artistic whims, and genuinely, deeply interested in my life, my sketches, my dreams of designing soaring structures, my often rambling thoughts on everything from philosophy to pop culture. His attention was a warm, constant light. Mom, Karen, on the other hand, was always a little more distant, a little less tangible. Her attention was often diffused, caught up in the shimmering, intricate web of her social circles and the relentless pursuit of appearances. She was beautiful, elegant, always immaculately dressed, but her emotional availability felt like a rare, precious commodity, parceled out in measured doses. The split, when it finally came, wasn't a surprise. The undercurrents of discontent had been swirling beneath the placid surface of their marriage for years, a slow, insidious erosion. But the aftermath, that was truly nuclear. The emotional fallout contaminated everything, radiating outwards and fracturing relationships that I had once believed were immutable. My relationship with Aunt Laura, Mom's younger sister, had always been strained, a taut, vibrating wire ready to snap. Even as a child, with an innate sensitivity that picked up on unspoken cues, I noticed the subtle, yet persistent, way she would criticize my choices. It began innocently enough, with my clothing. "That shade of green washes you out, Mackenzie, darling," and escalated to my career aspirations. I remember a particularly vivid family dinner, the scent of roast chicken heavy in the air, when I, a wide-eyed teenager, excitedly shared my dream of becoming an architect. Laura, with a dismissive wave of her perfectly manicured hand, had cut me off mid-sentence. "Architecture isn't practical for someone like you, Mackenzie," she declared, her voice dripping with condescension. "You've never been good with details." Each comment, delivered with the precision of a scalpel, chipped away at my nascent confidence, leaving behind small, insidious wounds. But Dad would always be there when we got home, his steady hand on my shoulder, his voice a balm. "Don't listen to her, Mac. You have an eye for beauty and a mind for structure. You'll build incredible things." His encouragement was the antidote, carefully applied, painstakingly rebuilding what Laura had dismantled. My siblings reacted differently to our fractured family, each carving out their own path through the emotional debris. Connor, my older brother by 2 years, a born pragmatist, became Mom's right-hand man, her loyal lieutenant in the new family order. He was always practical, disciplined, focused on tangible success, studying business with an almost fervent dedication, meticulously following the path our mother and Aunt Laura laid out for him, a path of stability, corporate ladder climbing, and respectable achievement. He was good at it, too, embodying the kind of success Laura particularly admired. Amber, my younger sister, was only 16 when the divorce happened, and she took it the hardest. She was a sensitive soul, artistic and introspective, and the sudden rupture of our family unit sent her reeling. She retreated into the vibrant, immersive worlds of her art and music, seeking solace in the melodies she composed and the colors she blended on canvas. Yet, paradoxically, despite her innate rebellion against convention, she somehow ended up in Mom's orbit, drawn perhaps by the promise of stability, hanging on Aunt Laura's every word about rebuilding a proper family, a semblance of the traditional structure we had lost. Laura seemed to cultivate this dependence, whispering promises of a restored normalcy that only she could deliver. The divorce itself was a battlefield of accusations and assets, a bitter, protracted war fought over the very foundations of our lives. Dad, with his own small civil engineering firm, wanted a clean, amicable split, offering generous financial terms, eager to minimize the emotional toll on us, his children. He just wanted peace. Mom, however, listened to Aunt Laura, whose voice, always present, always persuasive, became a constant, insidious drone in her ear. Laura insisted, with unwavering conviction, that Dad must be hiding money, manipulating assets, playing a dishonest game. The proceedings, fueled by Laura's relentless suspicions and Mom's growing paranoia, dragged on for nearly a year, a legal and emotional quagmire that consumed us all. Laura was the conductor of this acrimonious symphony, constantly whispering, turning what could have been an amicable separation into something truly ugly, venomous even. "Your father abandoned this family" became Laura's constant refrain, a toxic mantra repeated to my siblings, repeated until it became their perceived truth, despite Dad showing up to every school event, every medical appointment, every important moment in their lives, a steadfast, undeniable presence. He was there always. But Laura's narrative was louder, more insistent. When the dust finally settled, a fragile, unstable peace descended. Connor and Amber, swayed by Laura's narrative and perhaps drawn to the familiarity of the family home, chose to live with Mom. I, at 23 and finishing my architecture degree, a young woman finding her independence, chose a different path, spending weekends with Dad in his new, modest downtown apartment. It became my sanctuary, a place where the air felt lighter, untainted by the bitterness that clung to the family home. Those first few years after the divorce created a canyon between us, a gaping chasm filled with unspoken resentments and carefully constructed illusions. Holidays, once joyous gatherings, transformed into diplomatic negotiations, fraught with unspoken tensions and passive-aggressive maneuvers. Laura often served as Mom's spokesperson, a self-appointed gatekeeper to family access. "Your mother doesn't think it's appropriate for you to bring your father's new girlfriend to Thanksgiving," she'd call to inform me, her voice perfectly polite, yet laced with an undeniable malice, though Dad hadn't dated anyone since the divorce. Or, "We've already made plans that include Connor's girlfriend's family, so there's really no room at the table this year." Each exclusion stung, a fresh wound inflicted with calculated precision, but Dad, in his infinite wisdom and boundless capacity for forgiveness, never spoke ill of them. "They're still processing," he'd say, as he made us his legendary French toast on Christmas mornings, those intimate, quiet mornings when I simply couldn't face Laura's annual, inevitably charged Christmas Eve dinner. "Family is complicated, Mac. Just keep showing up when you can." His words were a guiding principle, a silent instruction to persist, to keep extending an olive branch even when it was repeatedly rebuffed. For months ago, a glimmer of light broke through the lingering shadows. I landed my dream job at Evergreen Design, a boutique architectural firm specializing in sustainable urban housing. It was everything I had worked for, a testament to years of dedication and resilience. The hours were long, the learning curve steep, a relentless climb, but I was finally putting my degree, my passion, to work, shaping the very fabric of the city. My first major project was designing affordable, eco-friendly apartments for downtown revitalization, a challenging yet incredibly rewarding endeavor. Dad was ecstatic, his pride radiating through the phone line when I shared the news, his voice brimming with genuine joy. Mom, however, was politely disinterested when I called to share the news. "That's nice, dear. Did you hear Connor's been promoted to regional manager? We're all so proud." Her words, while seemingly innocuous, were a stark reminder of the hierarchy of affection and attention that still existed within our fractured family. Connor's achievements, always framed through Laura's lens, seemed to eclipse everything else. Despite everything, the years of subtle rejections, the casual dismissals, I kept trying. Hope, that stubborn, persistent little flame, refused to be extinguished. Every few weeks, I'd invite Mom for coffee, hoping for a genuine connection, a moment of unburdened conversation. I sent Amber tickets to art exhibitions I thought she'd genuinely enjoy, trying to bridge the gap through shared passions. I even reached out to Aunt Laura when I heard she'd been promoted at the bank where she'd worked for 20 years, an attempt at extending an olive branch, a gesture of goodwill. Most overtures were met with brief acknowledgments, polite but distant, or rain checks that never materialized, fading like mirages in the desert. So, when Mom called in early December with a hesitant, almost tentative invitation to Christmas dinner at Laura's house, I was utterly shocked. The phone felt heavy in my hand, as if it contained a fragile, precious thing. "We think it's time to put the past behind us," Mom said, her voice unusually soft, a whisper of the warmth I remembered from childhood. "Laura's making her famous prime rib. Everyone will be there." "Everyone?" I asked, the single word laden with a mixture of desperate hope and ingrained suspicion. "Well, not your father, obviously," she replied, the familiar edge, the barely concealed resentment, returning to her tone like a recurring melody. "But Connor's bringing Stephanie. And Amber's excited to show you her college application portfolio." The invitation, though qualified, was a lifeline, a fragile thread of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, the canyon could be bridged. I spent days considering the invitation, weighing hope against history. The scales tipped precariously, burdened by years of disappointments, yet buoyed by the yearning for reconciliation. For this special, potentially transformative occasion, I decided to create personally meaningful gifts for each family member, tangible expressions of my enduring love and hope. For Mom, I painstakingly framed a restored photo of her and Grandma from the 1980s that I discovered hidden away in Dad's old albums, a nostalgic glimpse into a happier, simpler past. For Connor, I hunted down vintage blueprints of the first skyscraper built in our city, a fascinating relic he'd been obsessed with as a kid, before business became his singular focus. For Amber, my artistic sister, I carefully compiled a portfolio of my own college work, adding handwritten notes about professors who'd been particularly helpful and sketching out peaceful, inspiring spaces on campus where she could find solace and creative inspiration, even offering suggestions for art classes she might enjoy. Even for Aunt Laura, the architect of so much of my pain, I chose something thoughtful, something expensive and elegant, just like everything she admired, a custom engraved silver pen for her desk, acknowledging her recent promotion. The engraving, a small, hopeful gesture, read, "To new beginnings. M." It was a silent plea, a prayer for a fresh start, etched in gleaming silver. "You're setting yourself up," Dad warned, his voice laced with gentle concern, when I told him about the invitation. He knew their patterns, had seen their manipulations firsthand. "Karen and Laura have a pattern, Mac. Don't forget that." "People can change," I insisted, wrapping Connor's blueprint in shimmering silver paper, the rustle of the paper a counterpoint to my fervent hope. "It's been 5 years, Dad. Maybe they're ready to move forward." He squeezed my shoulder, his touch a comforting weight. "I hope you're right, kiddo. But if things go sideways, you call me. Promise? Christmas or not, I'll be there." My promise was unwavering, my belief in the possibility of change absolute. I never imagined I'd need to take him up on it. The weeks before Christmas were a whirlwind at Evergreen Design. Our team was racing against the clock to finalize the downtown housing proposal before the holiday break, a deadline that meant 14-hour days, often hunched over drafting tables, my eyes blurring as I scrutinized intricate 3D models. My small apartment, a converted loft in an old textile factory, became little more than a place to shower and occasionally collapse into exhausted sleep. "You look like you've been hit by a festive freight train," my best friend, Jenna, observed over our rare lunch break, her voice filled with affectionate concern. We'd been friends since freshman orientation, bonded by the sheer serendipity of showing up wearing the exact same obscure band t-shirt. She was now killing it as a graphic designer, her creative energy infectious, and remained my most honest, unwavering critic. Deadlines plus family reunions equals Zombie Mackenzie, I admitted, downing my third coffee, the caffeine a desperate attempt to jumpstart my weary brain. But the project's looking good. Stanton even said my sustainability solutions were elegant. High praise from the robot, Jenna quipped, referring to our notoriously stoic boss, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "But seriously, are you sure about this whole Christmas with the villains thing?" I picked at my salad, pushing a rogue crouton around my plate. "They're not villains. They're family. Family who've spent years making you feel like crap," she countered, her voice softening slightly, but her words hitting home with uncomfortable accuracy. "Last Christmas, Laura told you they were full up when you called about dinner. You were alone, Mac." "Maybe they've realized life's too short," I said, clinging to the thread of optimism. "Mom sounded different on the phone, and I really want to see Amber before she heads to college." Jenna's skepticism was mirrored by my coworker, Kyle, who'd become a close friend after we bonded over late-night pizza and the shared agony of complex design challenges. Unlike Jenna, who knew all the ugly, convoluted history of my family, Kyle offered a fresher, less biased perspective. "Family's complicated," he said thoughtfully as we calibrated the temperamental 3D printer for a new model, the gentle hum of the machine a background drone to his words. "My parents didn't speak for 3 years after my sister's wedding disaster. Now they're vacation buddies. See? People change." "People can change," I texted Jenna later that day, including Kyle's anecdote as triumphant evidence. "People can change," she conceded, her response a mixture of reluctant agreement and lingering cynicism. "Leopards and their spots, though." Her words, a playful jab, still held a grain of truth. My recent dating disaster with Jason hadn't helped my overall stress levels. After 3 promising months, a period of tentative hope and cautious optimism, he had simply ghosted me, vanishing without a trace. Only to resurface weeks later with a textbook, "It's not you, it's me" speech, delivered with all the sincerity of a telemarketer. The timing couldn't have been worse, coming just as the holiday loneliness, that particular brand of seasonal melancholy, was beginning to set in. Dad had invited me to join him at his colleague Frank's annual Christmas gathering, a legendary affair by all accounts, but I declined once Mom's invitation came through, prioritizing the slim chance of family reconciliation. "You're sure about this?" Dad asked during our weekly dinner at his place, his brow furrowed with concern. He was making his legendary lasagna, the apartment filled with the comforting, rich scent of garlic and oregano. I can still call Frank. His parties are legendary. Last year, his son brought his entire rugby team. "I'm sure," I said, setting the table with the mismatched dishes he'd accumulated since the divorce, each piece a memory of his new, independent life. "I need to try, Dad. For me, not just for them." He nodded, a silent acknowledgement of my need for closure, for resolution, sliding the bubbling lasagna from the oven. "I get it. Just remember what we talked about. Call if it goes sideways," I recited, the familiar refrain a comforting ritual. "I will, but it won't. I have a good feeling." I wanted to believe it so desperately. The day before Christmas, a day typically reserved for last-minute errands and hurried preparations, I dedicated myself to baking Grandma Thompson's famous bourbon pecan pie, the recipe Dad had painstakingly taught me during our very first post-divorce Christmas. It was a cherished family tradition from his side, a ritual that had, predictably, disappeared from Laura's elaborate Christmas spread after the split. The rich, sweet scent of warm pecans and bourbon filled my small apartment, a comforting, nostalgic aroma that momentarily chased away my anxieties. As the pie cooled, I carefully packaged the gifts I'd chosen with such thought and intention, each one wrapped in iridescent paper, adorned with satin ribbons, and wrote heartfelt cards for each family member, pouring my sincerity onto the page. I tried on 4 different outfits, a procession of festive garments, before settling on a forest green sweater dress with subtle gold accessories. Festive, yes, but not trying too hard. I wanted to look successful and put together, projecting an air of quiet confidence, without seeming like I was showing off, or worse, trying to overshadow anyone. The final touch was Grandma Thompson's delicate gold necklace, a graduation gift from Dad that I rarely wore for fear of losing it. It was a tangible link to my heritage, a small, shimmering talisman of protection. That night, sleep was an elusive phantom. Part of me was trapped in a relentless loop of worst-case scenarios. Awkward silences, passive-aggressive comments, the mortifying prospect of being seated at the metaphorical kids' table despite being 28, a professional adult. But another part, the hopeful part that Dad had always nurtured, that stubborn, irrational part, imagined reconciliation. Laughter that was genuine, not forced. The beginning of a new chapter for our fractured family, a fresh start. Tomorrow's going to be different, I told my reflection as I finally drifted off, the words a silent plea to the universe. It has to be. Christmas morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight glinting off the fresh, pristine snow that had fallen overnight, transforming the city into a sparkling wonderland. I woke to a flurry of text messages, a small, comforting ritual of connection. Jenna, ever the steadfast friend, sent moral support and a chaotic selfie from her parents' boisterous living room. Kyle wished me luck with family diplomacy, a knowing wink conveyed through emojis. And Dad's simple, heartfelt message. Merry Christmas, kiddo. Love you. I responded to each, sipping coffee from the handmade mug Amber had given me years ago, before the divorce soured everything. The ceramic was chipped, a small crack spiderwebbing across its surface, but it still held immense, sentimental value, a tangible reminder of simpler, more innocent times. Merry Christmas, Dad. Heading to Laura's around 4. We'll call tomorrow with full report. Remember, I'm one call away. No matter what. His immediate response was a lifeline, a promise of unconditional support that anchored me. The hours crawled by, each minute stretching into an eternity as I prepared for the evening. I carefully packed the pie in a sturdy carrier, arranged the gifts in a festive, overflowing bag, and took extra time with my makeup and hair, applying each brushstroke with meticulous precision, as if preparing for battle. By 3 o'clock, my stomach was a knotted mess of nerves, a churning maelstrom of anxiety and anticipation. I checked my appearance one last time. The forest green dress complemented my auburn hair, which I'd curled softly, letting it fall in waves around my shoulders. Grandma's gold necklace caught the light, gleaming softly, and I touched it for luck, a silent prayer whispered to its delicate links before grabbing my coat and heading out into the biting cold. The drive to Laura's suburban home took 40 minutes, each mile a journey deeper into the heart of my anxieties. My car radio played Christmas classics, and I hummed along nervously, the cheerful melodies failing to soothe the growing unease within me. Her neighborhood was a spectacle of holiday splendor, a dazzling wonderland of synchronized light displays, inflatable snowmen, and wreaths adorning every door. Laura's house, a large Tudor-style mansion at the end of a cul-de-sac, outshone them all, a beacon of professional-grade decorations, a massive spruce in the front window visible from the street, its lights twinkling like distant stars. I parked behind Connor's sleek BMW, its polished surface reflecting the festive glow, and sat for a moment, gathering courage, the engine's soft purr the only sound in the sudden stillness. Through the windows, I could see movement, the warm glow of holiday lights and the faint, tantalizing sound of laughter and Christmas music drifting across the snow-covered lawn. Everyone was already inside, celebrating without me. New beginnings, I whispered to myself, a desperate incantation, grabbing the pie carrier and gift bag, the weight of them strangely comforting. The concrete path to Laura's front door had been meticulously cleared of snow, a pristine, almost intimidating walkway, lined with glowing lanterns that cast a soft, ethereal light. My heels clicked against the pavement, the sharp sound echoing in the stillness, announcing my arrival before I even reached the porch. Standing before the imposing oak door, adorned with an elaborate wreath woven with pine cones and crimson berries, I took a deep, shuddering breath, shifted the pie to my left arm, and pressed the doorbell. The Westminster chimes echoed inside, a cheerful, innocent sound that belied the tension in my chest, followed by a momentary lull in conversation. My heart pounded, a frantic drum against my ribs, as footsteps approached. The door swung open, and there stood Aunt Laura, resplendent in a designer red dress, a pearl necklace gleaming at her throat, her posture impossibly rigid. For one hopeful, fleeting moment, I thought her eyes widened with pleasant surprise, a flicker of genuine warmth. That illusion shattered instantly, brutally, as her expression morphed into undisguised contempt, her eyes rolling dramatically, a gesture of profound disdain. "We don't want you here," she said, her voice cold and clear, each word a chilling shard of ice. "Go ruin someone else's holiday." The words hit me like a physical blow, an invisible fist to the gut, stealing my breath. Behind her, through the now gaping doorway, I could see into the warm, inviting living room where my family gathered. Mom was adjusting a centerpiece, her profile silhouetted against the sparkling lights of the tree. Connor was pouring wine, his movements fluid and relaxed. And Amber was laughing at something on her phone, her bright, youthful sound utterly untroubled. A perfect family tableau that clearly, excruciatingly, had no space for me. I was invited, I managed to say, my voice small, barely a whisper, a mere puff of air against the gale force of her rejection. Mom called. Laura's perfectly manicured hand, adorned with glittering rings, gripped the door tighter, her knuckles white. "Karen made a mistake. We discussed it after, and decided it would be uncomfortable having you here. Surely you understand." I looked past her again, a desperate plea in my eyes, hoping someone would notice. Intervene. No one even glanced toward the door. The laughter continued, the Christmas music played on, a cruel, mocking soundtrack to my humiliation. "Got it," I said finally, the words hollow, a raw acceptance of a truth I'd always feared. I nodded, a slow, desolate movement, and turned away, the pie and gifts still clutched uselessly in my trembling hands. "Merry Christmas." The defiant, almost sarcastic, farewell was aimed at no one, a last, desperate attempt at dignity. I made it halfway down the path, the cold seeping into my bones, before the door clicked shut behind me, the sound of final, unforgiving period to the sentence of my rejection. Only then did the tears start, hot and stinging, blurring the cheerful holiday lights into smears of distorted color, turning the picturesque scene into a blurry, distorted nightmare. Somehow, through a haze of shock and burgeoning grief, I managed to place the pie and gifts on the passenger seat, their weight suddenly unbearable, before collapsing behind the wheel of my car, my hands shaking too badly to insert the key into the ignition. The humiliation burned, a searing inferno worse than the biting December cold. They had discussed me after Mom's invitation, debated my presence like an inconvenience, a chore, and collectively decided I wasn't worth including. Worse, no one had the decency, the basic human empathy, to call and cancel. They'd let me shop, meticulously bake, carefully dress up, and drive across town, navigating holiday traffic, only to be rejected on the doorstep like a door-to-door salesman. I finally started the car, the engine groaning in protest, backing out of the driveway with tears streaming down my face, obscuring my vision. In my rearview mirror, Laura's house continued to glow with festive perfection, a picture-perfect Christmas card scene I would never be a part of. As I turned the corner, the last glimpse of the glittering facade fading from view, I pulled over, my car shuddering to a halt, and did something I hadn't done in years, something I had sworn I wouldn't do again. I called my dad. My sobs were so violent, so wrenching, that he could barely understand me. "Mackenzie, what happened? Are you okay?" His voice, usually so calm, was strained with immediate concern. They don't want me there," I managed between ragged gulps of air. "Laura said they all decided after Mom invited me." Dad's voice hardened, the gentle cadence replaced by an unfamiliar steel. "Where are you now?" "Just around the corner." "I can't drive like this." "Stay put." "I'm coming. 20 minutes tops." He hung up, leaving me in the echoing silence of my car, alone with my devastation. I sat there, frozen, crying until I had no tears left, my eyes burning, watching happy, oblivious families through the brightly lit windows of neighboring homes. Christmas lights, once a source of comfort, now blurred and doubled through my tears, their festive joy intensifying my profound isolation, mirroring the chasm in my chest. Eventually, slowly, painstakingly, I pull myself together enough to drive the few blocks to Willow Creek Park. I parked facing the small pond, now a sheet of frozen ice dusted with pristine snow, and waited for my father. The park was deserted on Christmas evening, a silent, desolate landscape. The playground equipment stood like snow-covered sculptures under the streetlights, ghostly and still. I turned off the car but kept the heat running, staring blankly at the frozen pond where ducks would return in spring, a distant promise of renewal. The pie that had filled my apartment with warm, spicy sense of home and tradition now sat forgotten on the passenger seat, alongside the carefully wrapped gifts that would never be opened, their purpose cruelly invalidated. The initial shock was wearing off, leaving something far worse in its wake, a hollow, aching recognition. This wasn't a misunderstanding, a simple miscommunication, or even just a bad day. This was the culmination of years of subtle rejection, years of being subtly, consistently pushed to the periphery, now made brutally, explicitly clear. They had discussed me, weighed my worth as a family member, and found me wanting. My heart clenched, a painful spasm in my chest. Memories surfaced with new, agonizing clarity, each one a fresh stab of pain. Last Thanksgiving, when Laura had accidentally set the table for one fewer person than needed, and that person, inevitably, was me. Connor's graduation celebration that I'd only learned about through belated Facebook photos, a digital ghost of a family event. Amber's art show, where Mom had introduced me to her friends as Karen's daughter, rather than by my name, as if my identity was merely an appendage of hers. 100 small, seemingly innocuous cuts that I'd rationalized away, dismissed as minor oversights, determined to be the bigger person, to rise above the petty slights. I reached for my phone, scrolling through family photos I'd saved over the years, a digital archive of a life I thought I was part of. In nearly every recent one, I stood slightly apart, a phantom limb, already being erased before I was officially cut out. How had I not seen it? How much time had I wasted trying to earn love, approval, and acceptance from people who had no intention of giving it, who actively conspired to withhold it? The tears returned, but they were different now. Not just tears of hurt, but a rising tide of fury at myself for being so naive, so stubbornly hopeful. I'd spent hundreds on gifts they'd never see, never appreciate. I'd changed jobs and apartments, but kept the same family phone plans so Mom could reach me easily, a subconscious tether I now regretted. I'd listened to Laura's endless bragging about Connor's accomplishments, her voice inflated with vicarious pride, while she'd never once asked about my career, my dreams, my breakthroughs. I thought about the last conversation with Dad, his gentle warning that I'd so carelessly brushed aside, dismissed as unnecessary caution. He'd seen this coming, known this pattern, because he'd experienced it himself, pushed out of his own family by Laura's insidious manipulations and Karen's compliant, often unwitting, participation. Yet he'd never poisoned me against them. always encouraging me to form my own relationships, to extend the hand of peace. My phone buzzed, startling me from my painful reverie. A text from Jenna. How's it going with the Christmas villains? Need an extraction plan. Before I could respond, headlights swept across the park, illuminating the snowy landscape as a car pulled in beside mine. Dad's reliable old Volvo, the same car he taught me to drive in as a teenager, its familiar hum a beacon in the darkness. He stepped out, his face tight with concern, his eyes searching mine, and I finally broke completely. The dam, holding back years of repressed pain and confusion, burst. I stumbled from my car into the freezing air and into his waiting arms, sobbing against his shoulder like I hadn't done since the night he moved out of our family home, the raw, primal grief of a lost child. He held me tight, one hand stroking my hair just as he had when I was small, a familiar comfort that seemed to make the world's injustices, however profound, feel momentarily fixable. She said they didn't want me there. I choked out, the words thick with tears and snot. They discussed it after Mom invited me. Like I'm nothing to them. Dad's body stiffened, a silent tremor of contained rage, but his voice remained steady, a calming force against my emotional storm. You are everything, Mackenzie. Everything. They're the ones missing out, not you. We stood there in the bitter cold, the Christmas lights twinkling in the distance, a mocking festive backdrop, while I poured out every detail. The meticulous preparation, the desperate anticipation, Laura's cold, contemptuous eyes, the perfect family tableau I'd glimpsed through the doorway. I'm such an idiot, I concluded, wiping uselessly at my mascara-streaked face, the black trails a stark testament to my distress. You tried to warn me. Dad pulled back, his hands gently framing my face, his eyes unwavering. You're not an idiot. You're someone who believes in family and second chances. That's not foolish. It's brave. He glanced at my car, noticing the forgotten pie and gifts on the passenger seat, his jaw tightening, a muscle twitching in his cheek. I've respected Karen's space for 5 years. I've never said a word against your aunt, but this crosses a line. It doesn't matter anymore, I said, a sudden, profound exhaustion settling over me, draining me of all resolve. Can we just go home? Watch Die Hard and pretend this never happened. Dad checked his watch, his expression shifting from concern to a grim, steely determination, a decisiveness I recognized from childhood emergencies and work crises. Change of plans, he announced, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. We're going back. Back to Laura's? The mere thought sent a fresh wave of panic surging through me, cold and suffocating. No way. Yes way. This ends tonight. He held up a hand as I started to protest, my objections dying in my throat. Not for them, Mackenzie. For you. 5 years is enough. I can't face them again, I whispered, shame and hurt warring within me, twisting my gut. You can, and you won't be alone this time. He squeezed my shoulder, his touch grounding me. Sometimes the only way past the pain is through it. Trust me on this. Something in his voice, not anger, but an absolute, unshakable certainty, steadied me. It was the voice of a man who knew precisely what he was doing, what needed to be done. I nodded slowly, a fragile acquiescence. Okay, but if she slams the door in our faces, we're getting ice cream after. Deal? He smiled, a flash of the old dad, the one who made pinky promises and built elaborate blanket forts on rainy afternoons. Deal. And Mackenzie, I'm proud of you, no matter what happens next. We transferred the pie and gifts to his car, leaving mine in the park, a silent testament to the evening's devastation. As we drove back toward Laura's house, the cheerful Christmas lights blurring outside the window into streaks of color, I felt something profound shift inside me. The searing hurt remained, a raw, throbbing wound, but beneath it, something harder was forming. A determination. A resolve not to be diminished any longer, not to be a victim of their manipulations. Dad drove with purpose, his hands tight on the wheel, his jaw set. For the record, he said, his voice low and deliberate, As we turned onto Laura Street, the familiar, pristine houses glowing under their festive lights. I've never told you this because I didn't want to influence your relationship with your mother or aunt. But what happened tonight? It's been Laura's playbook since college. She did the same thing to Karen's college friends, to my parents, to anyone she saw as competition for Karen's attention. Why would she see me as competition? I'm Karen's daughter. The question hung in the air, a desperate plea for understanding. Dad sighed, a heavy sound. Laura has always been possessive of your mother, Mac. And after the divorce, she needed someone to blame. I was the obvious target, but you chose to maintain a relationship with me. So, you're guilty by association. The pieces were falling into place, interlocking with chilling precision, creating a picture I'd never fully seen before, a puzzle solved with painful clarity. In Laura's twisted world, loyalty was absolute, unwavering, and uncompromising. You maintained contact with the enemy, and for that, you were excommunicated. He pulled up across from Laura's house, its Christmas lights, once so inviting, now seeming less festive and more like a glittering facade, a carefully constructed illusion. Ready? I wasn't. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat. But I nodded anyway, clutching the pie like a shield, a flimsy piece of armor, as we approached the house that had rejected me less than an hour before. This time, Dad didn't bother with the doorbell. He pounded on the door with enough force to rattle the elaborate wreath, his other hand protectively on my shoulder, a steady, reassuring weight. I stood slightly behind him, trembling, my hands shaking around the pie carrier, bracing myself for the inevitable confrontation. The door swung open, revealing Laura once again, her red designer dress a stark contrast to her tightening face. Her smug, triumphant expression faltered, a crack appearing in her carefully constructed mask at the unexpected sight of my father. David, what are you doing here? Her eyes flicked to me, narrowing, sharp and cold. This is a private family gathering. Exactly, Dad replied, his voice calm, but suddenly infused with a steely edge, a quiet power. That's why Mackenzie should be here. Laura's perfectly made-up face hardened, her lips thinning into a tight line. I think you both should leave before. Before what, Laura? Dad stepped forward, not aggressively, but with unmistakable purpose, a quiet, inexorable force. Before the rest of the family sees how you're treating my daughter? Your niece, his raised voice, now loud and clear, carried into the house, cutting through the muffled sounds of festivity. Movement stirred behind Laura as Mom appeared in the hallway, wine glass in hand, her expression a mixture of surprise and mild irritation. Her eyes widened at the sight of us, her confusion palpable. David? Mackenzie? What's going on? Laura turned, her body a rigid barrier, blocking Mom's view. Nothing, Karen. They were just leaving. Actually, Dad countered, his voice rising further, resonating with a quiet fury. We're here because your sister turned our daughter away from Christmas dinner. After you invited her. Mom's face registered a slow, dawning confusion. What? I didn't. She looked at Laura, then back to us, her brow furrowed. Mackenzie was supposed to come. I set a place for her. The living room had gone quiet, the Christmas music abruptly silenced, a palpable tension replacing the festive cheer. Connor appeared behind Mom, his gaze sharp, followed by Amber, whose eyes widened, her youthful innocence momentarily clouded at the scene unfolding in the doorway. Your sister told Mackenzie that the family had discussed it and decided she wasn't welcome, Dad continued, his voice tight with controlled anger, each word a slow, deliberate accusation. That she should go ruin someone else's holiday. Mom's face drained of color, a stark contrast against the redness of her festive dress. Laura, is this true? Laura's composure, usually unshakable, slipped momentarily before she recovered, a practiced ease to her deception. I was protecting you, Karen. After everything she's put you through, siding with him, criticizing your choices. I never criticized, Mom. I interjected, finding my voice at last, my anger finally overriding the crushing hurt. Never. I've spent 5 years trying to maintain relationships with everyone. 5 years of judgment and disapproval. Laura snapped, her voice rising, losing its carefully cultivated calm. Always comparing Karen to David, making her feel inadequate. That's enough, Mom said sharply, her voice cutting through Laura's tirade, surprising us all with its sudden authority. She set her wineglass down on a hallway table with a decisive click and moved forward, her gaze fixed on Laura. Laura, what have you done? Something changed in Laura's expression. A flicker of panic, a momentary vulnerability, quickly masked by defiance. I did what was necessary. She chose him over family. She didn't choose anyone over anyone, Dad said quietly, his voice a steady, undeniable truth. She's been trying to love her whole family. Both sides. Connor stepped forward, his brow furrowed, a slow realization dawning in his eyes. Aunt Laura, did you really tell Mackenzie we didn't want her here? Of course not. Laura scoffed, her voice laced with mock indignation, but her eyes darted away, a tell I recognized from childhood, a tiny, almost imperceptible twitch when she was lying. I simply explained that the timing wasn't ideal. That's not what you said. I cut in, anger finally, completely, overtaking the raw hurt. My voice was clear and strong, resonating with years of suppressed frustration. You said, and I quote, "We don't want you here. Go ruin someone else's holiday." After I drove 40 minutes with homemade pie and gifts for everyone. Amber pushed past Connor, her eyes wide with shock and dawning comprehension. You said what? Mom invited Mackenzie weeks ago. We've been talking about it. Laura's facade cracked further, splintering under the weight of mounting accusations. Amber, you don't understand. After everything that's happened. What exactly has happened, Laura? Mom asked, her voice dangerously quiet, each word measured, deliberate. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been making decisions about my relationship with my daughter without my knowledge. The tension in the entryway was thick enough to cut with a knife, palpable and suffocating. Neighbors across the street, drawn by the commotion, had noticed the raised voices. Curious faces, silhouetted against their own glowing Christmas lights, appeared in windows, drawn by the unfolding drama. Perhaps we should continue this inside, Mom suggested tightly, glancing at the growing gallery of spectators, her voice laced with a newfound firmness. Laura moved to block the doorway, her body rigid, a final, desperate act of control. Karen, think about what you're doing. After everything I've done for this family, move, Laura. Mom's voice left no room for argument. It was a command, an ultimatum, delivered with unexpected power. The contrast was jarring and almost physical whiplash. From the biting rejection on the doorstep, the raw, open wound of being turned away, I was now standing in the warm, cinnamon-scented entryway, adorned with lush garlands and an abundance of family photos. But as my eyes, now sharpened by a new, painful clarity, swept over the framed images, I noticed a chilling pattern, a conspicuous absence. In recent years, it was as if I had been systematically erased from their visual narrative, a ghost in my own family album. We moved into the living room, a space that should have radiated comfort and joy, but instead felt charged with an almost palpable tension. The Christmas tree glittered with ornaments, many I recognized from childhood, each a tiny, bittersweet memory. A half-eaten appetizer spread lay forgotten on the coffee table, a testament to the sudden interruption of their festivities, and holiday music played softly from hidden speakers, its cheerful notes now seeming discordant, almost mocking. It was a picture-perfect scene, straight out of a glossy magazine, except for the heavy, suffocating air that crackled with unspoken resentments and dawning revelations. Sit, Mom commanded, her voice surprisingly firm, gesturing towards the plush sofa. Dad and I remained standing, a silent, unified front against the discomfort that radiated from the other side of the room. I'd prefer to stand, I said quietly, my voice surprisingly steady, still clutching the pie carrier as if it were a shield, a tangible reminder of the gifts they had rejected. I won't be staying long. Mom's face fell slightly, a flicker of genuine regret crossing her features. Mackenzie, please. I didn't know. Didn't know what? Dad interrupted, his voice laced with a quiet, controlled fury that surprised even me. That Laura has been systematically isolating Mackenzie from this family for years? That she's been rewriting history to paint me as the villain and Mackenzie as my accomplice. That's absurd. Laura snapped, her voice sharp, but her usual, unshakable confidence was finally cracking, fraying at the edges. I've only ever told the truth about what happened. What truth would that be, Laura? Dad asked, his voice dangerously soft, a velvet glove over an iron fist. The truth about why Karen and I divorced? The truth about the financial arrangements you convinced Karen I was hiding? Or perhaps the truth about those weekend trips I supposedly took with other women while we were married? Mom's head whipped toward Laura, her eyes wide with a sudden, dawning horror. What is he talking about? Laura's composure, that carefully constructed fortress of deceit, faltered, cracks spreading rapidly across its surface. He's manipulating the situation as usual. Karen, we should discuss this privately. Her voice was a desperate plea, a desperate attempt to regain control, to pull Mom back into the manipulative bubble she had so expertly crafted. No more private discussions, I said firmly, my voice echoing with a newfound strength and authority I hadn't known I possessed. That's how we ended up here, with secrets and whispers and me standing outside in the cold. My words hung in the air, a stark, undeniable truth. Connor, who had been watching the exchange with growing discomfort, shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. Aunt Laura has only ever supported us, he said, but his voice lacked its usual conviction, wavering slightly. He sounded unsure, as if the foundation of his beliefs was suddenly crumbling beneath his feet. I didn't leave, Dad corrected, his voice calm, precise, cutting through Laura's carefully constructed narrative. I moved out because your mother asked me to, after Laura convinced her I was having affairs. Affairs that never happened. Mom sank into an armchair, her face ashen, the color draining from her cheeks. Laura told me she had proof. Receipts. Hotel confirmations. Her voice was barely a whisper, imbued with a terrible realization. Receipts from business trips, Dad said quietly, his gaze steady on Mom, filled not with accusation, but a profound sadness. Hotel stays for engineering conferences that Laura somehow transformed into romantic getaways. I offered to show you the itineraries, Karen. You refused to look. Because Laura said you'd falsified them, Mom whispered, her voice tinged with a dawning horror, the pieces of a 5-year-old puzzle clicking into place with agonizing precision. A wave of profound regret washed over her face. Amber, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, usually so vocal in her artistic expressions, suddenly spoke up, her voice small but clear, cutting through the thick silence. Is that why you always intercepted Dad's letters to me, Aunt Laura? You said they were manipulative and I shouldn't read them. The room went still, the only sound the faint, distant hum of the refrigerator. Dad's face drained of color, a raw, exposed wound of hurt blooming in his eyes. I wrote to you every week for the first year, Amber. When you never responded, I thought, I never got a single letter, Amber said, her voice breaking, the pain of a profound betrayal clear in every syllable. Not one. All eyes turned to Laura, whose perfectly composed facade, so meticulously maintained for years, was crumbling by the second, collapsing under the weight of her exposed lies. I was protecting you all, she insisted, her voice losing its edge, cracking with desperation, a thin veneer over a growing panic. He abandoned this family. Stop saying that. I shouted, the words erupting from me, surprising everyone, including myself. Years of quiet anger, of suppressed frustration, exploded to the surface. Dad never abandoned anyone. He's been at every important event in my life. He's tried to be at yours too, Connor, Amber. But somehow the details always changed last minute, or you were told he canceled, or some emergency conveniently arose. Connor frowned, turning slowly to Laura, a storm brewing in his eyes. You told me Dad said he was too busy to come to my business school graduation. I called him myself, Laura maintained, her voice shrill, defiant, but her eye twitched, a tiny, almost imperceptible tell that screamed of her deception. Check your phone, Dad said quietly to Connor, his voice steady, compelling. May 15th, 3 years ago. I texted you asking what time I should arrive. You never responded. Connor pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen, scrolling back through years of messages. His face changed as he found what he was looking for, a slow, terrible realization dawning in his eyes. It's here. And I never saw it. He looked up, confusion warring with a burgeoning sense of betrayal in his expression. I was using Laura's old phone that month, because mine broke. She must have. The implication hung in the air, heavy and undeniable, a damning indictment. Connor turned to Laura, betrayal written across his features, stark and undeniable. You read his message and didn't tell me. You let me believe my own father didn't care enough to come. Laura's composure finally shattered completely, fragmenting into 1,000 pieces. I was protecting this family. He cheated on Karen. He abandoned his responsibilities. He turned Mackenzie against all of us. She was flailing, desperately trying to regain control, to deflect, to cling to her manufactured narrative. No, Laura. Mom's voice was quiet, but firm, imbued with a steel I hadn't heard in years, as she slowly stood up, her gaze fixed on her sister. That's not what happened, is it? David never cheated. That was your story. He never abandoned his responsibilities. You manipulated circumstances to make it appear that way. And Mackenzie never turned against anyone. You systematically cut her out because she refused to reject her father. The truth, spoken aloud after 5 years of insidious distortion, seemed to physically change the air in the room. It vibrated with a newfound honesty, a raw, uncompromising clarity. Amber was crying silently, tears streaming down her face, a quiet acknowledgement of the pain and confusion that had plagued her. Connor looked shell-shocked, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him. Mom stood with a straight spine, years of misconception falling away from her face like shedding an old skin, revealing a strength I'd forgotten she possessed. And Laura, composed, controlling Laura, finally broke. Everything I did was for you, Karen, she shrieked, her voice high and desperate, cracking with fury and something else, a desperate, profound loss of control, a primal scream of a queen dethroned. He never deserved you. I was the one who stood by you through everything, not him, not his daughter. My daughter, Mom corrected, her voice gentle, yet firm, stepping toward me. Mackenzie is my daughter, Laura, not some extension of David. She reached for my hand tentatively, her touch hesitant, almost unsure. The dam inside me broke at her touch. 5 years of hurt, rejection, and confusion poured out in heaving sobs as Mom pulled me into her arms for the first time in what felt like forever, her embrace a balm to my raw, aching soul. I'm so sorry, she whispered against my hair, her voice choked with emotion. So, very sorry. Over Mom's shoulder, through my blurry, tear-filled vision, I saw Laura's face transform with an almost animalistic fury and something else, a desperate, unhinged quality, the panic of someone whose carefully constructed world was crumbling. This is ridiculous, she spat, her voice venomous. You're all falling for their act. After everything I've done, I think, Dad said quietly, his voice cutting through Laura's desperate accusations with an undeniable authority, it's time for you to leave, Laura. Leave. Laura shrieked, her voice incredulous, disbelieving. This is my house. Actually, Mom said, pulling back from our embrace, but keeping a protective arm around my shoulders, her gaze firm on Laura. It's my house. I own it. You live here because I invited you after your divorce, and now I'm asking you to go. Laura's face went through a kaleidoscope of raw emotions, shock, betrayal, fury, then a dawning panic. You can't be serious. It's Christmas Eve. Yes, Mom agreed, her voice unwavering. It is, and I'd like to spend it with my children, all of them, and their father, without your interference. Laura looked around desperately for allies, her eyes darting between Connor and Amber, then Dad, finding none. Connor had moved to stand beside Amber, both watching their aunt with new, critical, disbelieving eyes. Dad remained by the door, a steady, unmoving presence. And I stood in my mother's embrace, tear-streaked, but finally, miraculously, seen. Fine, Laura snarled, snatching her purse from the side table, her movements jerky, uncontrolled. Enjoy your happy family reunion. Don't call me when he disappoints you all again. She stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the ornaments on the tree, the sound a resounding finality that vibrated through the house. In her wake, a heavy silence fell over the living room, thick and suffocating. 5 years of manipulation and misunderstanding hung between us like invisible smoke, a tangible presence. Then, unexpectedly, Amber started to laugh. A small, hiccuping sound that grew, gaining momentum, until tears streamed down her face, not of sadness, but of a strange, almost hysterical release. "What's so funny?" Connor asked, bewildered, looking between his giggling sister and my still tear-streaked face. Amber pointed at the pie carrier I'd somehow managed to hold on to throughout the entire confrontation, its contents a silent, ironic symbol. Mackenzie brought pecan bourbon pie. Laura's allergic to pecans. It wasn't really funny, not in the traditional sense, but suddenly, inexplicably, we were all laughing. The hysterical, cleansing laughter that comes after emotional devastation, a release of pent-up tension, a balm to wounded souls. In that moment of shared absurdity, something long broken, something deeply fractured, began tentatively to mend, a fragile but undeniable reknitting of broken threads. The laughter gradually subsided, leaving us in an awkward but lighter silence. We stood in a loose circle, 5 people connected by blood and history, but essentially strangers after years of manipulation and distance. Mom was the first to move, gently taking the pie carrier from my hands, her touch surprisingly tender. "You made Grandma Thompson's bourbon pecan?" she asked softly, her voice filled with a wistful nostalgia. I nodded. "Dad taught me the recipe, that first Christmas after everything." A shadow of profound regret crossed her face. "I always loved that pie. Laura convinced me it was too fattening." "Laura convinced us of a lot of things," Connor said, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so uncannily like Dad's that it made my heart twist with a bittersweet ache. "I don't even know where to start sorting truth from fiction anymore." "We start here," Dad said quietly, his voice unwavering, his gaze sweeping over each of us. "In this moment with honesty." Mom nodded, squeezing my hand, her grip firm. "David's right. No more secrets, no more manipulations." She looked around at each of us, her eyes clear, resolute. "I owe all of you an apology, especially you, Mackenzie. I let my own hurt and Laura's influence blind me to what was happening. I failed you as a mother." "You didn't fail," I said, though a part of me, a deeply wounded part, had felt exactly that for years. "Laura is persuasive. She always has been." "That's not an excuse," Mom insisted, her gaze unwavering. "I'm your mother. I should have seen what was happening." Amber, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, processing the rapid-fire revelations, suddenly spoke up, her voice small but clear, imbued with a newfound courage. "I knew something was wrong. I knew, but I was afraid to say anything. Laura was always there, always watching, always explaining why we should be angry at Dad. Suspicious of Mackenzie." She looked at me with tear-filled eyes, raw and vulnerable. "I missed you so much, but I didn't know how to reach past all the poison." I crossed to my sister, taking her hands in mine, our fingers interlocking, a silent promise of renewed connection. "I missed you too, Amber. Every single day." Connor cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the raw emotional atmosphere, but making a visible effort. "For what it's worth, I didn't know about Laura turning you away tonight. None of you did. When Mom said you were coming, we were all… Well, I was looking forward to it. Mom nodded confirmation, a quiet acknowledgement of his sincerity. I set a place for you. I even made that cranberry sauce you like. She shook her head in disbelief, a small, sad laugh escaping her lips. Laura must have been watching for you to arrive before any of us noticed. She must have removed the place setting. Classic Laura move, Dad muttered, then caught himself, wincing slightly. Sorry, not helpful. But Mom surprised us by nodding, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. No, you're right. It was classic Laura. She's been controlling my life, all our lives, for so long, I stopped seeing it. She straightened her shoulders, a new resolve hardening her features. But that ends tonight. She turned to Dad, a complexity of emotion on her face, regret, gratitude, and a dawning appreciation. David, I owe you the biggest apology of all. The things I accused you of. The way I let Laura turn the divorce into a war. Dad shook his head, his gaze softening. That's water under the bridge, Karen. No, she insisted, her voice firm, resolute. It's not. It's a dam that's been poisoning everything downstream. We need to break it properly. She took a deep breath, gathering her strength. I'm sorry, David. Truly sorry for believing the worst instead of what 15 years of marriage should have taught me about your character. Dad's face softened, a genuine, heartfelt warmth entering his eyes. Thank you. That means a lot. An awkward silence fell, heavy with unspoken emotions, until Connor spoke up, ever the pragmatist. So, what now? Laura's gone, but she's also been the center of everything for 5 years. Christmas, family gatherings, even our regular lives. Now, I said firmly, finding a strength I didn't know I had, my voice resonating with a newfound determination. We start over. Right here. I set the bag of gifts on the coffee table, the carefully wrapped packages a symbol of a different kind of offering. I brought presents for everyone. Real ones. Not peace offerings or bribes. Just gifts from me to my family. Amber's eyes lit up with a glimmer of her old spark, a return of the innocent excitement that had been dimmed by years of conflict. I have something for you, too, Mackenzie. I didn't know if I'd ever get to give it to you. She hurried from the room, returning moments later with a small package wrapped in hand-decorated paper, adorned with her distinctive artistic flourishes. Seeing this small, hopeful gesture from my sister, who had been the most distant, the most lost to Laura's influence, something profound shifted inside me. The hurt wasn't gone. 5 years of rejection doesn't vanish in an hour. But alongside it grew something new, something powerful, determination. I have a proposal, I said, looking around at my fractured family, a new vision forming in my mind. Let's leave. Leave, Mom echoed, her brow furrowed. But we just got you back. Not leave each other. I clarified, a small smile touching my lips. Leave this house. Laura's house. Really? It's full of her influence, her rules, her version of our family. Let's go somewhere neutral. Somewhere we can start to find each other again. Dad nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression on his face. My place isn't big, but the tree is up and there's plenty of food. To my surprise, Mom was the first to agree, her eyes alight with a sudden, daring spark. Let's do it. I can pack up the dinner I prepared. It seems wrong to waste a perfectly good prime rib, even if the evening isn't what we planned. We could do a picnic on the living room floor, Amber suggested, a hint of genuine excitement, of childhood memories rekindled in her voice, like we used to at the old house when the power went out during storms. Connor, ever practical, ever focused on logistics, added, I can grab the wine and desserts. Maybe stop for ice on the way. Just like that, Laura's perfectly orchestrated Christmas dinner, her masterpiece of control and manipulation, was dismantled. We moved with a shared purpose, a collective momentum that felt exhilarating. Mom and Connor packed food in the kitchen, their movements efficient, almost synchronized. Amber collected personal items and gifts, carefully choosing what to bring. Dad, ever the silent architect of comfort, made space in his car for the additional passengers. I found myself in the dining room, looking at the elaborately set table where my place setting, I now saw, was conspicuously absent. Mom appeared beside me, her gaze following mine to the empty spot. "I really did set a place for you," she said softly, her voice filled with quiet regret. "Earlier today. It must have been removed while I was in the kitchen." "I believe you," I said, and realized, with a surprising surge of clarity, that I did. "But it doesn't matter now. We're making a new table, figuratively speaking." She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes, crinkling the corners, in a way I hadn't seen since before the divorce, a genuine warmth radiating from her. "You grew up strong and wise, Mackenzie. I wish I could take credit for that." "You can take some," I conceded, remembering the good years, the foundational years before Laura's influence took hold. "You taught me to stand up for myself. It just turned out I needed to use that lesson within the family." Within 30 minutes, an astonishing feat of spontaneous organization, we had packed everything essential into 2 cars. The elaborate decorations, the designer dinnerware, the picture-perfect Christmas tableau, all left behind in favor of mismatched plates and an impromptu celebration. As we stood in the driveway, preparing to leave, Mom turned to look at the house one last time, a thoughtful, almost solemn expression on her face. "I've let Laura control my life since we were children," she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper against the cool night air. "Tonight feels like waking up from a very long sleep. It won't be easy," I warned, thinking of the complex, agonizing unwinding of truths and lies that lay ahead, the years of damage to be undone. "Laura won't simply disappear from our lives." "No," Mom agreed, her gaze fixed on the brightly lit house. "But she'll never have the same power again." She reached for my hand, her fingers intertwining with mine, a silent, powerful bond forming between us. "I've missed 5 years with my daughter, Mackenzie. I won't miss another day." We caravanned to Dad's downtown apartment, a modest 2-bedroom with a view of the river, its lights twinkling like scattered diamonds. It wasn't fancy like Laura's suburban showcase, or grand like the old family home, but it was warm and lived in, filled with a comforting, masculine energy. A small but cheerful tree stood in the corner, its lights a gentle glow, and framed architectural drawings adorned the walls, some professional, gleaming with precise lines, some my early, hesitant work from college. "You kept these?" I asked, touching a frame that held my very first design project, a shaky blueprint for a fantastical treehouse, rendered with youthful ambition. "Of course," Dad said simply, his voice filled with a quiet pride. "I'm proud of you." The evening that followed wasn't perfect. It was messy, uncomfortable at times, a raw, unpolished glimpse into a family relearning how to be together. There were awkward silences, punctuated by the clinking of mismatched cutlery, and moments when old hurts flared up, brief, sharp bursts of pain. Connor struggled most with the revelations about Laura, having been closest to her influence, his loyalty now challenged, his worldview shattered. Amber oscillated between giddy relief and quiet withdrawal as she processed the enormity of the deception, her emotions a fragile pendulum. Mom seemed both lighter and more fragile, like someone recovering from a long, debilitating illness, shedding the weight of years of manipulation, yet still vulnerable. But as we gathered around Dad's coffee table, fine china on paper towels, drinking excellent wine from mismatched mugs, something authentic emerged. We shared stories, carefully at first, then more openly, each revelation a thread in the tapestry of our shared history, finally woven with honesty. I learned about Connor's secret passion for photography, a creative outlet he'd hidden because Laura had deemed it impractical, a waste of his business acumen. Amber revealed her application to art school, not the business program Laura had been relentlessly pushing, her true aspirations finally given voice. Mom spoke of her interest in returning to teaching, a career she'd abandoned when she married Dad, a quiet dream she'd suppressed for years. Laura said it would reflect poorly on the family if I worked as just a teacher, she explained, the quotation marks evident in her tone, a clear sign that the words were Laura's, not her own. Looking back, I don't even know what that meant. It meant she could control you better if you were financially dependent, Dad said, then winced, catching himself. Sorry, still not helpful. But Mom nodded thoughtfully, a dawning understanding in her eyes. No, you're right again. That pattern is so clear now that I'm looking for it. As midnight approached, marked by the distant pealing of church bells, we opened gifts. Not just the ones I'd brought, but others hastily gathered from Laura's house, retrieved from beneath her now hollow tree. Amber's gift to me was a hand-illustrated book of memories, moments we'd shared as children, rendered in her distinctive artistic style. The last page showed two adult women, clearly us, with a blank space between filled with question marks. I wasn't sure we'd ever bridge the gap, she explained shyly, her voice soft, but I hoped. I gave her the portfolio of my college work, complete with notes about professors and quiet, inspiring spaces on campus. For when you start art school, I said, my voice filled with encouraging warmth. No more hiding your talent. Connor seemed genuinely moved by the vintage skyscraper blueprints, his practical nature momentarily eclipsed by a flicker of youthful wonder. I'd forgotten this obsession, he admitted, a wistful smile playing on his lips. Somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking about what I loved and focused on what was expected. Mom cried when she unwrapped the restored photo of her with Grandma, tears tracing paths down her cheeks. Where did you find this? I thought all these old photos were lost in the move. Dad kept them, I said simply. He kept a lot of things. The evening wasn't a magical fix for 5 years of division. It was raw, honest, and at times, intensely painful. But as we sat in Dad's living room, the lights of the city twinkling beyond the windows and the Christmas tree glowing in the corner, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel that night. Hope. Not the desperate, fragile hope I'd carried to Laura's doorstep, the kind that shatters with a single dismissive word, but something steadier and more grounded, a nascent, resilient force. We had taken the first step. We had chosen truth over comfort, confrontation over false peace, authenticity over a gilded illusion. We had collectively said enough to the insidious patterns that had kept us apart. And in doing so, we had begun to reclaim not just Christmas, but our family itself. As we prepared to leave around 1 o'clock in the morning, the night air crisp and cold, Mom hesitated at the door, a new resolve etched into her features. I'm not going back to Laura's tonight, she announced, her voice firm, unwavering. Or maybe ever. Where will you go? Dad asked, concern evident in his voice, his brow furrowed. I'll get a hotel for now, she said decisively. Tomorrow, I'll start looking for my own place. She looked around at us, her gaze encompassing each of her children. I need to figure out who Karen Thompson is without Laura's influence. It's long overdue. Amber and Connor exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. We'll help you pack tomorrow, Connor offered, his voice softer than usual. And I think I might look for my own place, too. I've been saving, but Laura always said it was foolish to waste money on rent. You can stay with me until you find something, Dad offered, surprising us all with his open generosity. Both of you, if needed. The sofa pulls out and Mackenzie's old room is available. The offer hung in the air, not just accommodation, but reconciliation. A bridge across 5 years of absence, extended freely. I'd like that, Amber said softly, her eyes wide with a glimmer of hope. If it's really okay. More than okay, Dad assured her, his voice warm with genuine pleasure. It's what I've hoped for. As they prepared to leave for the hotel they'd booked on short notice, I pulled Mom aside, a final, quiet conversation under the porch light. This won't be easy, I warned again, the weight of the challenges ahead pressing on me. Laura won't just accept this new reality. Mom's eyes, so like my own, held a new resolve, a clear, unwavering certainty. I know, but I've lost enough to her manipulations. She took my hands in hers, her grip firm, reassuring. I can't change the past 5 years, Mackenzie, but I can promise you this. Never again will anyone come between me and my children. including Laura. It wasn't everything. It wasn't perfect. But as I watched them drive away, their taillights disappearing into the snowy night, plans made to meet for breakfast the next morning, I knew something fundamental had shifted. The path forward would be complicated, filled with difficult conversations and inevitable setbacks. But for the first time in 5 years, there was a path. Dad came to stand beside me at the window, looking out at the quiet street. "You okay, kiddo?" I considered the question seriously, letting the silence stretch between us, allowing myself to feel the complex tapestry of emotions swirling within me. "Not entirely," I admitted, a small, genuine smile finally touching my lips. "But I will be. We all will be." He nodded, understanding as always, his presence a comforting anchor. "Bourbon pecan pie for breakfast?" I laughed, a real, unburdened laugh, releasing some of the tension I'd carried for so long, the sound echoing softly in the quiet apartment. "Absolutely. It's Christmas after all." 6 months passed after that fateful Christmas night, 6 months of careful rebuilding, of painful, raw conversations, and of slow, deliberate healing. Winter melted into the hesitant greens of spring, and spring bloomed into the vibrant fullness of summer, mirroring the gradual, organic transformation within our family. The first weeks were the hardest, a raw, exposed period of adjustment. Laura didn't accept her banishment quietly. She was a force of nature, a hurricane of spite and manipulation. There were tearful phone calls to Mom, alternating between insidious guilt trips and thinly veiled threats, each designed to chip away at Mom's newfound resolve. She showed up unannounced at Connor's workplace, spinning elaborate tales that Mom was having a mental breakdown, desperately trying to discredit her. She sent furious, victim-blaming emails to extended family members, painting herself as the innocent victim of our collective ingratitude, a martyr betrayed by her own kin. But something fundamental had changed within us. Mom, with a quiet strength I'd never fully appreciated, stood firm, an unyielding rock against Laura's tempest. She found a small but sunny apartment across town, a space imbued with a fresh, independent energy, and to everyone's surprise, applied for a teaching position at the local community college. By February, she was Professor Thompson again, teaching English literature to wide-eyed first-year students, coming home each day with stories that made her eyes shine with a purpose and joy I hadn't seen in years. Connor struggled most with the transition. Laura had been deeply embedded in his professional and personal decisions for so long, a pervasive influence in every aspect of his life, that he initially floundered without her guidance, adrift without her constant direction. But by March, he'd bravely started therapy, a quiet journey of self-discovery, and was asking difficult, profound questions about his career path. "I'm good at business," he confided during one of our now regular coffee meetups, a newfound vulnerability in his voice. "But I don't know if I love it." I never really asked myself that question before. Amber flourished almost immediately. She moved in with Dad temporarily, taking my old room and transforming it into a vibrant, chaotic studio, filling it with canvases and art supplies. She received acceptance letters from 3 art schools and ultimately chose one in the city, a decision that allowed her to maintain our newly rekindled relationship, a precious bond we were both eager to nurture. Her artwork changed, too. It became less constrained, more vibrant, more expressive, as if Laura's stifling influence had been literally darkening her palette. Dad remained our steady, unwavering center, a quiet force of unconditional support without expectation or judgment. He and Mom, navigating their new reality, established a new, tentative friendship based on co-parenting adult children through crisis, a complex, evolving dynamic. They would never be a couple again. Too much had happened, too many wounds were too deep. But watching them share parenting advice or laugh over shared memories without Laura's poisonous filter was healing in its own way, a quiet, profound form of reconciliation. As for me, the emotional earthquake of Christmas brought unexpected gifts, a profound shift in my own trajectory. With my family relationships on a healing path, shedding the toxic layers of the past, I found new focus at work. I threw myself into the downtown housing project, incorporating elements from both Mom's aesthetic sensibilities and Dad's practical engineering expertise, a harmonious blend of their strengths. In April, my designs were selected as the basis for the final project, a professional breakthrough that had me calling Dad in tears of sheer joy, a testament to years of dedication and quiet resilience. But the personal transformation went deeper. After years of trying to prove my worth to a family that had been manipulated into rejecting me, I finally turned that energy inward, focusing on self-acceptance rather than external validation. I set firm boundaries, clear lines in the sand. I started therapy, a journey of introspection and healing. I cleared out my contact list, prioritizing people who genuinely valued my presence rather than those who saw me as an inconvenience or a means to an end. Among those who stayed was Kyle, my coworker, who had offered such simple, profound wisdom before Christmas. Our friendship deepened through late nights finalizing project details, fueled by pizza and shared challenges, and by summer had evolved into something more, something genuine and tender. Unlike my disastrous relationship with Jason, with Kyle, I never felt I needed to be perfect or apologetic about my complicated family. He simply accepted all of me, messy history included. Laura remained a shadow at the edges of our lives, a persistent, if diminished, presence. She moved to another suburb, found a new job, and, according to mutual acquaintances, continued to tell elaborate, self-serving stories about our family's dysfunction, painting herself as the perpetual victim. Occasionally, she made contact, a clipped birthday card to Amber, a passive-aggressive LinkedIn message to Connor, always testing for weaknesses in our newly established boundaries, probing for an opening to reassert her control. In June, she showed up unannounced at Mom's apartment, a dramatic intrusion. I happened to be there, helping Mom hang curtains in her home office, a simple act of domesticity. Laura stood in the doorway, her designer handbag clutched like a shield, her eyes darting between us, as if searching for signs of discord she could exploit. "Karen, we need to talk," she announced, her voice imperious, barely acknowledging my presence. "This has gone on long enough." I tensed, ready to intervene, to step forward and protect Mom, but Mom surprised me. She sat down her coffee cup with deliberate calm, her movements slow and measured, and faced her sister directly. "No, Laura, it hasn't gone on nearly long enough," she said firmly, her voice imbued with a quiet, steely resolve. "For years, you manipulated me, isolated me, and damaged my relationship with my children. 6 months of independence is just the beginning of my recovery." Laura's composure cracked slightly, her eyes widening in disbelief. "That's not fair. I've only ever wanted what's best for you." "What's best for me," Mom replied, her voice unwavering, "is having my children in my life. What's best for me is making my own decisions. What's best for me is not having someone constantly tell me how I should feel about my own family." Laura's gaze shifted to me, searching for an ally, a chink in our united front, and finding none. "Mackenzie, surely you can see this arrangement is unhealthy." It was the opening I'd been waiting for, without even realizing it. My chance to speak my truth directly, unequivocally, to the woman who had orchestrated so much pain. "What was unhealthy?" I said evenly, my voice calm but laced with a quiet power, "was being systematically cut out of my family because I refused to reject my father. What was unhealthy was watching you manipulate my mother and siblings into believing lies about me. What was unhealthy was standing on your doorstep at Christmas, being told I wasn't wanted." Laura flinched, visibly recoiling at the directness, and used to being confronted so unequivocally. "I was protecting the family," she insisted, her voice rising in desperation. "No," I interrupted, 5 years of hurt crystallizing into absolute clarity, empowering my voice. "You were controlling the family. There's a difference." She had no response to that. After a few more desperate attempts at emotional manipulation that fell remarkably flat, like a deflated balloon, she finally left, her retreat as dramatic as her arrival. Mom and I finished hanging the curtains, made dinner together, and talked about Amber's upcoming art show instead of dwelling on Laura's visit. It wasn't that she couldn't hurt us anymore. She could, and sometimes did. But her insidious power over us was broken, shattered irrevocably. Today, on a warm July evening, we've gathered at my apartment for dinner. It's nothing special, just a regular Wednesday, a mundane weekday, but that's precisely what makes it so precious. This casual weeknight gathering, filled with laughter and easy camaraderie, would have been utterly impossible 6 months ago, when every family interaction required Laura's orchestration and approval, her permission. Mom brings a salad she's experimenting with, her eyes bright with a newfound culinary enthusiasm. Connor arrives with a bottle of excellent wine and stories about the photography class he's taking on weekends, his passion finally given free rein. Amber shows us sketches for her summer project, her art alive with a vibrant, uninhibited energy. Dad calls to say he's running a little late but promises to bring dessert, his voice filled with familiar warmth. Kyle moves comfortably among my family, refilling glasses and asking Connor about his latest camera purchase, seamlessly integrating into our evolving dynamic. Looking around at them, at our perfectly imperfect, healing family, trying to find our way back to each other, I feel a fullness in my chest that has nothing to do with the delicious meal. The family I longed for during those 5 painful years wasn't a fantasy after all. It was always here, just buried under layers of manipulation and misunderstanding, waiting to be unearthed. I'm not naive enough to think our journey is complete, that all the scars have vanished. We all carry wounds from those years, invisible badges of past battles. Sometimes old patterns emerge, subtle echoes of the past, and we have to consciously choose different responses, actively resist the old, destructive dynamics. Mom still occasionally defers important decisions, looking around as if for approval, a habit ingrained by years of Laura's influence. Connor can be defensive when his choices are questioned, a lingering reflex from a lifetime of being told what to do. Amber withdraws when emotions run high, seeking refuge in her internal world. And I still brace for rejection when I reach out, a protective reflex I'm working tirelessly to unlearn. But we're finding our way back to each other, one honest conversation at a time, one shared meal, one vulnerable admission. We've learned that family isn't automatic. It's a choice you make every day, a relationship you tend with intention and care, a garden you must constantly weed and water. We've learned that boundaries aren't walls, but healthy definitions of respect, invisible lines that protect our individual integrity while allowing for connection. Most importantly, we've learned that speaking truth, however painful, however uncomfortable, is ultimately less destructive than comfortable lies, than the insidious poison of unspoken resentments. As for me, I've learned that my worth isn't measured by others' willingness to make space for me at their table. Sometimes the bravest, most transformative thing you can do is walk away from a table where you're not valued and build your own, inviting only those who genuinely want to be present, who celebrate your authentic self. 6 months ago, I stood on a doorstep with bourbon pecan pie and carefully wrapped gifts, seeking approval from people who had been taught, manipulated, to withhold it. Today, I host dinner in my own space, a sanctuary of authenticity, offering not gifts, but my authentic self, messy history and all, and miraculously, receiving the same in return. It's not perfect. It's better than perfect. It's real. I catch Mom's eye across the room, and we share a smile of quiet understanding, a silent acknowledgement of all we've overcome. So much lost time, yet somehow exactly where we need to be. Sometimes the longest journey isn't measured in miles, but in the distance between who you were trained to be and who you choose to become. Have you ever had to walk away from something you desperately wanted in order to find what you truly needed? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need permission to create their own boundaries this holiday season. Remember, sometimes the people who deserve a place in your life are the ones who never make you question whether you belong in theirs. Thank you for listening to my story.